2,300 years ago, a man sat on a throne in the city of Pataliputra, a city larger than Rome, and governed an empire stretching from Afghanistan to the Bay of Bengal. He did not rule through faith alone. He did not rule through fear alone. He ruled through something far more powerful and far more modern than anyone gives him credit for. He ruled through system. This is the story of the Mauryan Empire. Not its wars, not its legends, but its machinery. The invisible architecture that held together the largest empire India would see for the next 2 millennia. We are in northern India, roughly 320 BC. A young man named Chandragupta Maurya, with the counsel of a brilliant strategist called Kautilya, also known as Chanakya, has just overthrown the Nanda dynasty and established a new empire with its capital at Pataliputra, the city we know today as Patna in Bihar. But defeating an enemy is one thing. Governing what comes after, that is where empires are truly built or broken. Chandragupta Maurya was, by every account, an autocrat. He concentrated power in his own hands. And yet, the Arthashastra, the great political treatise attributed to his advisor Kautilya, paints a picture of a ruler who understood that no single man can govern a continent alone. According to the Greek ambassador Megasthenes, who lived at the Mauryan court and wrote an account called the Indica, the king was assisted by a royal council. Members of this council were chosen for their wisdom, but their advice was not binding. The king listened, and then the king decided. Below the king sat the senior officers of state. The most powerful among them were the mantrin, the minister, the purohita, the high priest, the senapati, the commander-in-chief, and the Yuvaraja, the crown prince. These men were not symbolic figures. They were paid generously, as much as 48,000 panas, a substantial silver currency, reflecting how seriously the Mauryan state took the business of governance. At the other end of the pay scale, the lowest officers received as little as 60 panas. This enormous disparity tells us something important. The Mauryan state was building a professional hierarchy, not an egalitarian assembly. Competence, rank, and proximity to power were monetized. This was not ancient informality. This was bureaucratic design. The empire was vast, too vast for one city to control everything directly. So the Mauryas divided it into provinces, each placed under a governor called a Kumara, a prince from the royal family itself. This was deliberate. By placing blood relatives in charge of distant territories, Chandragupta ensured that provincial governors had a personal stake in the empire's survival. The major provincial centers were Tosali, which governed Kalinga, Suvarnagiri, which ruled the Deccan, Ujjain, which oversaw the Avanti region, and Taxila, which held the strategically critical northwestern frontier. And at the very center of this system sat the capital city itself, Pataliputra. Megasthenes described it in astonishing detail. 9.33 miles long and 1.75 miles wide, bounded by a deep ditch and a wooden wall crowned with 570 towers and pierced by 64 gates. This was not a settlement. It was an engineered metropolis. The city was administered by 6 committees, each consisting of 5 members. These committees handled everything: sanitation, the registration of births and deaths, the regulation of weights and measures, the welfare of foreigners, and general civic functions. This was, in essence, a municipal government, operating in the 3rd century BC. If Chandragupta was the sword, Kautilya was the architecture behind the sword. The Arthashastra describes a central government that maintained approximately 24 departments of state. These departments controlled and regulated virtually every sphere of economic life: agriculture, trade and commerce, weights and measures, crafts such as weaving and spinning, mining, and more. The state appointed 27 adhyakshas, superintendents, to manage these departments. They measured land. They inspected irrigation channels. They regulated the water supply for farmers. They monitored markets. The Mauryan state was what modern economists would recognize as a command economy, with the crown exercising monopolies over mining, the manufacture of weapons, and the sale of liquor. The Samaharta was the highest officer in charge of tax assessment and collection. The Sanidata was the custodian of the state treasury and storehouse. Kautilya considered the Samaharta more critical than the Sanidata because poor assessment caused greater damage than poor storage. Tax collection was not simply revenue extraction. It was the financial foundation upon which armies, roads, and the entire administrative apparatus rested. No administrative system survives without enforcement, and the Mauryan state understood this with ruthless clarity. According to the Roman writer Pliny, Chandragupta maintained 600,000 foot soldiers, 30,000 cavalrymen, and 9,000 war elephants. Another source records 8,000 chariots. The Mauryas also maintained a navy. The administration of this military apparatus was handled by a board of 30 officers, divided into 6 committees, each responsible for one wing of the armed forces: the infantry, cavalry, elephants, chariots, navy, and transport. But military strength alone cannot hold an empire together. Information is equally essential. The Mauryan administrative machine was backed by an elaborate system of espionage. Various types of spies, called tirthas, collected intelligence on foreign enemies, monitored the conduct of officers, and were embedded throughout the empire as invisible threads in the fabric of Mauryan governance. Here is the insight that most history classes miss entirely. The Mauryan Empire's real achievement was not military conquest, it was standardization. Think about what that means across a continent-sized state in 300 BC. The Mauryas introduced a uniform currency, punch-marked silver coins carrying the symbols of the peacock and the crescented hill, enabling market exchange across vast distances. They built roads connecting Pataliputra to Nepal, to the northwestern frontier, to Kalinga, to Andhra and Karnataka. They spread a common system of weights and measures. They deployed a shared script, Brahmi, across most of the subcontinent. And when Ashoka issued his edicts, they appeared in Brahmi, Kharoshthi, Aramaic, and Greek, so that every literate person within the empire's reach could read the king's instructions directly. This was a ruler who understood that governance requires communication, and communication requires meeting people in their own language. The Mauryan administrative legacy did not end with the empire. The kingdoms that rose on its ruins, the Shungas, the Satavahanas, the Chetis, all borrowed its administrative structures, its Prakrit inscriptions, and its bureaucratic logic. The machinery outlasted the dynasty that built it. The Mauryan Empire did not fall because it was poorly governed. It fell because it was too well governed, creating, by its very success, the conditions for its own dissolution. As the material culture and iron technology of the Gangetic heartland spread to peripheral regions through Mauryan trade routes and administrators, those regions gained the capacity to stand alone. The provinces no longer needed the empire to survive. New kingdoms rose. The Brahmanical reaction against Ashoka's Buddhist policies undermined elite support. The financial burden of the world's largest ancient army drained the treasury. And the northwestern frontier, neglected while Ashoka pursued cultural conquest, was left open to Greek and Scythian incursion. In 185 BC, a general named Pushyamitra Shunga killed the last Mauryan king in public and seized the throne of Pataliputra. But the idea that one could govern a subcontinent through systematic administration, through departments of state, provincial governors, standardized weights, coins, roads, and scripts, that idea survived. It survived through the Guptas, through the Mughals, and in the architecture of the modern Indian state, with its civil services and federal hierarchy, you can still see the shadow of Kautilya's blueprint. Because the most enduring weapon any empire can forge is not a sword and not a wall. It is a system.